What's up, everybody? Kchris Griffin here with another episode of the Horns Down podcast. Not talking Texas tonight, not even going to jab at them. What we're doing, we're talking about all the recruiting news that you need to know ahead of this weekend, which is a huge recruiting weekend for OU. Something a little bit different. We don't do too much recruiting over here at the Horns Down podcast, but we are tonight. I got a special guest around the corner that's going to come on here and give us some great insight about some of the kids that we are trying to recruit, that we're trying to get to commit this weekend, whenever, all of that on the other side of this. All right, Horns Down podcast, we're back.
You know, there's a lot of great OU podcasts, but there's only one where the horns are always down. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the Horns Down podcast.
Everybody, please give it up for my guy, a new friend of the show, Chris Mason, the recruiting analyst for Sooners 360. Chris, what's up?
Not much. Thanks for having me on tonight.
Hey, I appreciate you for coming on. So, yes, let's go ahead and get the little jokes out of the way because I'm sure everybody's going to make them Chris and Chris. But, you know, Chris with a K. Now you got Chris Mason out here. But with that being said, are you ready to talk some recruiting?
I'm always ready to talk recruiting. You're basically going to have to shut me up.
All right. So let's go ahead and jump just directly into it. So, you know, one of the things I looked at with this 25 class early on is that you have a lot of Oklahoma talent, like a lot of homegrown Oklahoma talent. Well, outside of Sperry, but it looks like for the most part, OU is clean house. I mean, you got the kid from Wagner, you got the DM from Wagner, you got Nickens. I'm not the best with names right now, but you got
You've got the Carl Albert kids,
exactly.
Trene Washington and Marcus James.
Mm-hmm. You got the Shakota kid as well.
Elijah Thomas, who
you cleaned up really well in Oklahoma, something that we haven't done in years. Now, you know, could Lincoln have done it? I'm sure that he could have in spurts, especially offensively, but he didn't, you know? So that's a story for another day. But Venables kept his word. He kept his promise, and he came in here and he locked down that talent in Oklahoma. Is there anybody else in Oklahoma that we need to be on the lookout for as far as, who OU is targeting?
Well, the two big names that are uncommitted right now are Nate Roberts, the tight end from Washington, Oklahoma. His brother, Jake Roberts, is a portal transfer, and he's going to be playing his senior year in Norman. Nate is probably down to Oklahoma and Ohio State. He's ranked anywhere from top 100 to top 150. He's 6'5", 235, and is kind of your classic all-purpose tight end. He's comfortable inline blocking. He's comfortable flexed out. When you think of a kind of a classic big tight end, kind of like a George Kittle type from the Niners, maybe in terms of a high ceiling comp, that's kind of where I would put Nate Roberts. He looks just fantastic, and obviously OU's got connections with the family because Jake Roberts played at North Texas with Seth Luttrell. So OU's fighting Ohio State in that recruiting battle. And then the other big name that's not committed is C.J. Nixon from Weatherford. He is a defensive end, tight end, small forward. He's 6'5", 220, ridiculous athleticism, wingspan. If he's not catching long touchdown passes at sort of a flex tight end position, he's playing a rush end where he's just a blur off the edge, or he's scoring 20 points and throwing down some tomahawk dunks on the basketball court. So he's a pretty amazing two-sport athlete. Looks like OU has a pretty big lead there right now. CJ, because of his basketball commitments, hasn't had the chance to take a lot of unofficial visits. And he's going to be involved with AAU basketball during the summer. He's a legit basketball prospect. He's probably, somewhere, probably like a G5, low power 5 kind of prospect. It's hard to tell in basketball because of it's not really I don't follow that as much, but CJ is a fantastic looking defensive end. If you think about him, he could be 6'5", 6'6", 240, 250 pounds in college and just be a blur off the edge. And he's ranked anywhere as high as top 50 in the country.
Mhm.
The rankings have just come. All the major services have redone their rankings in the last week, so they're shuffling people around a little bit. So, but C.J. Nixon is probably at least a top 100 player, and I think OU. He has a number of forecasts in from different websites, competitor websites, crystal balls forecasts. They're all kind of copying that same kind of MO system. But C.J. Nixon would be the other one. The other interesting thing, Chris, is that there are, in any other year, there would be 3 offensive linemen, I think, in state that OU would offer. Broderick Shull from the at Bixby, and then Blake Cherry, also from the Tulsa area. He's just gotten a Texas A&M offer. Broderick Shull just got ranked by On3 as the number 18 player in the nation. I'm not quite sure. I see that on film, but
yeah,
it
just came out of nowhere. I remember hearing that somewhere. It may have been from you or someone, but it was just kind of like out of the blue, where you're just like, what? Okay,
yeah, because he doesn't have an OU offer right now. And we know Brandon Hall, and we know Bill Biedenbauer. You know, Brandon Hall is who's basically Brandon Hall sort of has Oklahoma to make sure that OU's not missing kids. So his focus is heavily Oklahoma. So you know that OU's not missed this kid because he's playing at Bixby. It's big time, Oklahoma football in the eastern part of the state. So, and then the last guy who I just talked to this week, he's a his family is in the military, and he just moved from Jacksonville, North Carolina, and he's now in Elgin, Oklahoma, which is sort of near Lawton, near Fort Sill, kind of a small town.
Yeah.
And he's visiting. He's not going to visit OU this coming weekend, but next weekend. He's kind of searching for an OU offer. His name is Antonio Ogmoro. He's 6'5", 300 pounds. And he has offers from Missouri, Tennessee, North Carolina State, Virginia Tech, Iowa State, K-State. So he's also another interesting prospect. In any other year, Chris, all 3 of those guys would have OU offers. But when we're talking needs, I think OU's biggest need in this class is offensive tackle. And I can talk a little bit about why OU hasn't offered some of these other guys.
We'll get to that. I want to jump back real quick all the way to the Roberts. So I think an interesting point for me to be made about that is that you're looking to put Roberts and Mitchell together. I think those are your 2 that you're wanting to see be out there on the field, especially in a Seth Luttrell offense. Guys, if you've watched this show and you've heard me talk, you know that I've said, hey, if you want to know what Seth Luttrell can really do, don't look at the Alamo Bowl game. Go and look at the North Texas film. Type in Mason Fine highlights. I went and watched, I forgot his name. Sorry about this, but there's an SEC guy that broke down the Seth Luttrell offense. It was there when Jason Bean, of all people, was the quarterback for them. Tight end is used an awful lot. And tight end can be a decoy, can be a lot of things. They do a lot. You're going to see a lot of similar concepts to what you saw from Levy with a lot of split zone concepts. But you're also going to see a bunch of bluffs too off of that. And that tight end plays a huge role, whether that be as a blocker down the field, taking at the second level or even the third level, or that tight end is a decoy. That tight end is just running wide open down the field. So I think those 2 are who you're wanting to put together, obviously, in that class. And then the CJ Nixon kid, I think that's an interesting name that popped up. And you've seen crystal balls and all the rest of that stuff. You just haven't seen the commit yet, but I think that is coming. But I think that he's a guy that's really shooting up the boards that people are going to be really interested on. But let's keep hitting this rundown. So obviously, I think that was the first question that I have for you. What are OU's needs in this class? Because if you look at these last 2 classes, it looks like they really went out there and got the guys that they wanted. And not only the guys that they wanted, but they really went and got some dogs too, some top dogs out of the 23 and 24 class respectively.
Yeah, I mean, when you take the 23 class and the 24 class and you kind of stack them together, you can see how much talent OU how much they've upgraded the roster. overall and how much talent's been added. But the one position that sort of is I would say a need, it's offensive tackle in the last class. I think OU got two fantastic interior offensive linemen in Eddie Pierre-Louis and Eugene Brooks. Both those guys on films are, as you would say, dogs. They're killers inside. I mean, they are big men with bad intent. You watching Eddie Pierre-Louis, just running around smashing people. I mean, and then Eugene Brooks in the Under Armour game was throwing around 5-star offensive linemen and kind of ragdolling them a little bit, and kind of he was going to pancake some guys, and you could see he kind of held back. He didn't want to embarrass anybody on national TV. But you need offensive tackles. OU obviously did sign at least one guy who's definitely an offensive tackle in the 24 class, Isaiah Autry. He's enrolled early. He's a big guy, big frame, good athlete, but he probably needs the season a little bit. So OU needs probably one or two tackles that can come in, play early, and push the roster in terms of talent. And the reason why OU hasn't offered some of the O-line I just talked about is because there are 4 guys who OU is heavily involved with in region who are either 5-stars or top 50 in the nation. So it's Michael Fasusi in Louisville, who's a 5-star. Ty Haywood at Denton Ryan, he's a 5-star. Lamont Rogers at Mesquite is only ranked in the top 50. He's only a top 50 composite. Any year a top 50 composite offensive tackle, OU fans would be, overjoyed. They'd be like, "Oh wow, this is great!" But and then there's Andrew Babalola, who's in Kansas City, and he is also a 5-star offensive tackle. So,
well, let me ask you this question here. Now, obviously, Beatonbow will go out there and pull a 5-star. He'll pull a couple of 5-stars if you let him. But you know that he also loves to get his 3-star and kind of those low 4-star recruits, as I would call them, right? And he turns those into prized possessions. So, should anybody that's watching this video, should they, be hesitant to fall in love with the stars by these kids' names, or are they actually, those guys, or not Jags, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
No, I mean, so the two verbals they have sort of fit that traditional mold, except Ryan Foji, the offensive tackle that OU got from the Houston area, sort of like a low 3-star, like 6 weeks ago. And now that he's verbal to OU and everyone's really looked at his tape, he's now going to be a consensus top 100 player in the nation. So it's a little bit like the recruiting services took one look at the fact Bill took this guy so early, and they were like, "Oh, well, let's go look at his film again." And then they looked at his film and were like, "Oh, okay, he's 6'5", 6'6", 300. He moves. He's athletic. He's a fluid athlete at that size. He's aggressive. He hits people. He's a top 100 player." The other guy is Owen Hollenbeck, who is kind of to use every cliche that I have in my, he's a lunch pail guy. He's working every, he's working every down. And I think it was 247 that had the quote that from his coach that Owen Hollenbeck broke 4 face masks last year of defensive linemen. So, and he's a huge kid. He's like 6'4", 320, carries it really well. And he's just all about, he's not a great athlete, but he's all about just burying people. So Bill's kind of got his guys already like that. But when I'm talking there's a clip, Chris, which I'll be sure to send you. I'm not sure if you saw it, of Michael Fasusi playing dodgeball in high school and it's like Michael Fasusi, 6'5", 300, and he's playing dodgeball, and he's just like dodging, throwing, running around with all these just these regular high school senior guys, just regular guys, 6 foot, 5'10", 180 pounds, just not small guys, just regular kids. And Fasusi's playing dodgeball with them, and he's not getting hit, and he's just like flinging balls left and right, and he's jumping all around, and you're just like, that guy cannot be 6'5", 300 pounds.
Now let me for all the people who are watching this are going to say, who cares about dodgeball, or dodgeball doesn't translate to this. You got to remember, Bob Stoops walked into a gym and saw DeMarco Murray doing windmills and different things like that, 360s or whatever, just playing basketball randomly. You see what I'm saying? So random acts like that, this kid, 6'5", 300 pounds, you're not supposed to move like that. You're supposed to be basically a slow target for everybody. Everybody's supposed to target you and be able to hit you. But if you're able to show things like that, it just shows athleticism, or at least the way, what you need to be able to do laterally, right? So, yeah. I mean, those are the guys. So here's my question, okay? So my question is simply this about Beatenbow. Now, Beatenbow has gotten a lot of flack over the last, I would say probably 2.5 years, in my opinion, because I think a lot of people want to see him get all of these 5 stars and all the rest of this stuff. Are we going to get our hopes up again for that, and he's not going to be able to seal the deal? Or, do you have a good feel for these kids? I guess I'm just asking that simply because, there are still some Beatenbow naysayers out there. There's some unbelievers out there.
Well, I mean, everyone points to starting so many transfer portal offensive linemen, right? And it all extends from undersigning during the last 2 years of the Lincoln Riley regime, right? The COVID class only signing 2 guys, and then only signing two guys in Lincoln's last class before he left, which leave the numbers low. So it's all fair. The numbers should be higher. Chris, last year I got burned. I thought Bill was all primed to get the guys he wanted in June and July, and it didn't pan out.
Yeah.
I think most of these guys worked out at OU summer camps last summer. So Bill's been connected with these kids longer. He knows their work ethic. He knows their coachability, for lack of a better term. Mm-hmm. Their families have been very connected. And Bill is going to be, when these kids are all starting to decide, which is going to be, early May, early June, Bill's going to be coming off another successful NFL draft day, right? Yeah. Tyler Guyton is going to go in the first round. Anton Harrison had an all rookie type year. Wanye Morris, was the starting tackle for the Chiefs.
Won a Super Bowl.
What a Super Bowl. Walter Rouse is going to be a NFL pro. I'm not sure he's going to be a first round pick, but he'll go somewhere in the top 3 rounds, and if he has to move inside the guard to maintain his NFL career, I think Walter can do that. Mm-hmm. So I think Bill's got a little more ammunition to use with these players. He can point towards some more recent success with NFL draft picks and the money those guys are making, and Creed again signing another contract. So if I had to guess, Chris, of the 4 top guys I mentioned, I think Bill gets 2 of them. And the only reason I can't tell you which 2 is right now OU is in the lead or top 3 position with all 4 of them.
Mm-hmm. Well, not only that, but go ahead, plug it. Go ahead. That's a great segue to the plug. Tell them where they can find you at too.
Well, they can find me at Sooners360.com on the website. We have a great message board where they can interact with me. It's a kind of a curated experience. No trolls, not a lot of silly arguments, just a lot of good football discussion. You can also find me on Twitter at CM_Sooners360. If you're following me there, you're going to be getting tweets from me every day. You're going to be getting the most relevant Sooner recruiting news going on that day. I'm not going to flood you with a bunch of crap, but if you want to be on Twitter and know what's going on with Sooner recruiting, the most important things, follow me and you'll be up to date on that stuff.
Right, you heard the man. Get over there and follow him on everything. Let's interact. Let's do all those things. But let's keep it going. So, obviously, Future Freaks event this weekend. That is a major event. That's what everybody is talking about. That's what everybody's been talking about for the last probably week and some days or whatnot. So I guess the question is simply this: what are some names that we need to know outside of the guys that we've already talked about to start this pod? What are some names to know?
Well, the first thing is just to backtrack a little bit. So it's a Future Freaks event. So OU's so far ahead on 25 recruiting that they're almost moving to 26 recruiting in some aspects. So there's going to be a lot of 26 kids and a lot of 27 kids at this event, more so than 2025. They're going to have some 2025 kids come in. The biggest name there is probably Trent Wilson. He's a defensive end, defensive tackle from the D.C. area. On film, he looks like the best three technique that OU is recruiting. He looks like he could be 6'3", 290, and just that blur on the inside, that kind of defensive tackle offensive linemen just can't get their hands on, and all of a sudden he's disrupting everything from the inside. In terms of 2026 kids, I'm just going to give you four. There's a bunch of names coming. I'm going to give you four names, and I'm going to talk about one 2027 kid, which seems crazy, but it just seems crazy that OU's making 2027 off. It is, but I'm like, this guy was just a freshman. So the first name for 2026 to know is Taj Overton, the defensive tackle from Owasso. And he's got an OU offer, and he's the only other two in-state defensive tackles that have received an offer this early by the Sooners would be David Stone and Gerald McCoy. To put that in some perspective, so that's the territory he's in, and his sophomore film is very, very good. The next name is Isaiah Williams. He's a defensive back from the Houston area. He's 6'2", 190, 200 pounds, just flies around, elite-looking film. I think by the time everything, the 26 rankings are a bigger mess than the 25 rankings, to be honest. No, because players are just popping up, and no one really has an idea of, it's these kids got 2 years of, they just were sophomores. No one knows anything about them. And I think he's going to be an elite kid. And then Mason James, again, I'm talking about guys with OU offers. I'm not talking about anybody who doesn't know an OU offer. Mason James is an athlete from Norman. He just got a Michigan offer. He has an OU offer. And Chris, there's a little bit of Ryan Broyles in his footage, his game. I think that's the receiver. Yeah. So you say there's some Ryan Broyles in his game? You can't tackle. I mean, you can't tackle him. They get him the ball all over the place, and he just making big time play after big time play. So, it's hard not to make that Ryan Broyles comparison. He's like 5'11", 170. So it's almost perfect size for like a slot receiver. Now that we're moving to the Seth Luttrell scheme, where I think the slot receiver again becomes a big part of that. And he's just making plays all over the field. And it's hard not to make a Ryan Broyles comp, the Sooner great from Norman, Oklahoma himself. And then continuing echoes of the past, the last 2026 guy I'll mention is Caden Jones, running back athlete from Jenks. He's son of Kawan Jones, and he's 6 foot, like 180. So he's a little bit of a longer, leaner athlete than Kawan. Kawan was like 5'9", like 190 pounds, and was a smaller back, but was very, very physical. But his kid at Jenks, again, that looks like a top 100 kind of kid on film. And he's a running back, wide receiver. Jenks uses him all over the field to get points going on. But he could be a running back. He could be a corner. He's got a lot of places he could go. So
it seems to me that, dare I say, Oklahoma is loaded over the next, at least 2 years, 2 to 3 years? As far as having ingrown talent?
Yeah, there's a lot of
talent, excuse me.
Yeah, there's a lot of good talent in state again, which is great for Oklahoma, good for OU. OU success rate with blue chip Oklahoma athletes is like ridiculously high. There's very few misses in that category. Usually, if you're a 4-star kid in state and you go to Oklahoma, it all pans out. I mean, we can go back and in the last 20 years, and that just sort of divides it in. But yeah, 26 is looks like a good year in state. There's still a couple other players. There's some other guys who may receive offers from OU over the next 12 months. I imagine OU will push a bunch of kids to come to their summer camp, get worked out there, and get offers there. But the last kid I want to mention, 2027, and this is kind of just to show you how ridiculous things have gotten, is 2027 offensive tackle. So it's a 27 offensive tackle with basically an OU offer. His name is Jordan Caraway. He's from the Dallas area, and he's 6'5", 295 pounds as a high school freshman, and he looks really good on film. I saw a photo of him next to Bob Stoops, he came up for an official visit, and I'm like, oh man, who's this massive offensive lineman? He must be like 25. I need to figure out who his name is. And then like 27. I'm like 27. I mean, and that's the thing is Chris, and when the big list for this Future Freaks event, I'm always in the past really used to OU doing these, sophomore events, future events, and it's running backs, it's cornerbacks, it's wide receivers. You don't used to seeing a lot of trench guys, but there are a half dozen offensive linemen in the 26 class coming in this weekend. I mean, big guys. One is Drew Evers. Drew Evers, 2026 brother of Nick Evers, who signed with OU and transferred to Wisconsin, but he's still looking at OU heavily, and he's 6'5", 280. So we're talking about the Bills already got probably somewhere in the range of 8 to 10 offensive line targets from the 26 class, which is crazy.
Which is crazy, but which is also great. And I think a lot of people who watch this pod and who listen to us will definitely be happy with that because of the focus on the trenches. I mean, the trench work has to be done, making that transition to the SEC now, especially. And I mean, teams are getting better. Competition is rising and all the rest of that, but you got to be better in the trenches. We've seen, because in these next few classes, I'm hopeful that the payoff finally comes, because I feel like Big V has came in there with Todd Bates and Chavis and been able to stabilize our defensive line issues. But you're hoping with Stoney and then the next kid after him, you're hoping those guys can get us back to that elite level. You see what I'm saying? So, and then offensive line wise, I mean, it's beat and bow. Whereas you may have some, you may not have all the belief in the world in like the execution as far as signing these kids, as far as development when they get there and all the rest of that. 9 times out of 10, those kids are panning out. Yes, you have the birds and you have kids like that have all the talent in the world to go and be a first rounder. Sometimes it just doesn't pan out. But offensive line is a hard position to play, and it's a hard position to learn, especially playing with beat and bow. And the fact of the matter is that you've had a bunch of different schemes lately. You had Riley, you had Levy. So I mean, it's a lot of different things. And I think, when Riley left, one of the things that you heard was that Beat and Bow wasn't able to put the 5 guys that he thought would work best out there on the field. With Levy, it kind of felt like things were clicking a little bit better, but the fact of the matter is it's just the tempo and all the rest of the stuff. A lot of those intangibles that he wanted to run, he wanted to spread you out, kind of spread you thin, kind of a little bit of stubbornness in the play calling from time to time. I digress. I know people have heard me talk about both of those subjects at length, but basically what I'm trying to say is that maybe now this is going to be the perfect marriage, the perfect union with Seth Luttrell being at the helm, because I think we will see tempo, but I think that we will see better situational play calling, which bodes well for the offensive line. Do you agree with me on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you listen to my Sooners 360 recruiting podcast, we record every week. We talk a lot of O-line recruiting because it's been a big topic, and my co-host on the show, Caleb Cummings, is talking a lot about how we need to be more. He just hopes that Seth is more intentional about how he does stuff, right? That it's not that when it's a run and play, let's not make it a run. Let's not have the option here. If we want to run for 3 yards, let's run for called runs. Take it out of the quarterback's hands, and be more intentional about how we're doing things with double tight ends and doing things, and don't rely on the no huddle as your gimmick. Be more intentional about what you want to achieve, and be more intentional about the talent you want to put out for that play, for that. So I think you're right on target there. I do think, Lincoln, it's a hotly debated topic, but according to every source I have, Lincoln was messing with Bill's offer lists. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
He wasn't letting Bill offer everybody who wanted. So Bill was having to work off the list Lincoln was letting him. And then Lincoln would say, well, if you don't get the guys, don't worry, just go to the portal and pick up other players. So I think that was very much a philosophy. So I think Bill is.
It still is.
And if you look at USC, it's not changed.
It still is.
So you look at the last O-line class Bill signed, it was 5 guys, right? And you look at Josh Iasosa from Oklahoma City, Edmond Santa Fe area. He's a big physical kid. I had the pleasure of talking to Daniel Ekinkumi from London before he signed with OU. A great story. He's from the NFL Academy in London. He had to qualify to join an academy to play football. So, because if you're 6'5" and 300 pounds and you're walking down your hallways in your high school, the coach isn't going to be like, well, you got to convince me to, you're a good athlete. The coach isn't exactly like, well, you got to convince me you want to play football. Let's go through a process. But he's probably screaming, hey, come try out. I mean, Daniel Ekinkumi had to basically apply to get into the academy. So his desire to play football is extremely high.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a level that you don't quite think about. So I think an Eddie Pierre-Louis is he's a mauler. Brooks is a mauler. They're all very physical guys. So I think Bill's getting more of the kind of folks that he wants, that he likes, and I think we're seeing the perfect confluence in 2025 in that there's 4 highly rated guys that Bill really, really wants. Bill says this guy's elite, and the recruiting services are saying this guy's elite. So that's sort of converging here because one of the other things that's kind of difficult. So Chris, the combine just was last weekend, right? And Tyler Guyton's there, and all the offensive linemen are running the 40, which is kind of ridiculous. They should run a 20, right? You only want the 10-yard split's only really relevant.
Yeah.
But when you think about the guys, there's like about 6 or 8 offensive tackles that might go in the first round, and 1 or 2 of them are like 5-star guys, J.C. Latham from Alabama and Amarius Mims at Georgia. But Joe Alt from Notre Dame, who might be the first tackle taken, he's like a low 4-star. Fashanu from Penn State, again, he's got the same rating as Isaiah Autry out of high school. Tyler Guyton was a defensive tackle out of playing football in Dallas, and TCU picked him up as a tight end. And then the other guys are, there's a guy from Washington, a guy from Oregon State. They're all low 3, mid 3. It's not all 5 stars. It's not quite like the other positions. It's the most difficult position to evaluate at a high school too.
Yeah.
There's lots of busts with the big time guys. I mean, I think he'll get straightened up at Iowa, but if you watched any Alabama football this year, Caden Proctor, who was the 5-star guy, everyone thought he was a can't miss guy. And if you watch that Texas game and watch the Michigan game, 2 games, way apart, he got abused. He got
used and abused. He got baited.
And that's the number 1 guy that everybody thought was can't miss. And Bama threw him in the starting lineup, and he just, in that Texas game, I was just like, he can't block anyone. What's he doing? Why is he playing? And because they didn't have anybody else because they kept losing guys to the draft. So at some point that catches up with you. So it's a hard position to evaluate. Mm-hmm. But right now, I would say Bill's able to make his own offers. He's made lots of offers. He's offered 2026 kids. Mm-hmm. They'll try and get those kids on campus for camps this summer to build those relationships. That it looks to me like the Bill's got the best pipeline that I've seen from an offensive line recruiting standpoint from OU in a while. And I've been tracking OU recruiting since like 97. So, people forget that Mark Mangino won a national championship with 6 offensive linemen.
Yeah.
There's that 2000.
Hey, shout out to Mangino. If you've been watching this show, back in the day, Seth and I used to always ask, like, what do you think is going on with Mangino right about now?
And Kevin Wilson, mastermind behind the 08 offense, which is, I think maybe one of the best offenses in other than the LSU offense, 2019 offense. I think it goes head to head with any of those. And Kevin Wilson was not an easy guy to play for, and he would lose struggling offensive line recruiting, and then you had Kittle as the offensive line coach, and so Bill, Bill struggled, and he made some mistakes in recruiting last year. He let the Grant Bricks thing go on for far too long. He should have dropped that earlier.
Well, we don't mention that name around here.
He just made a mistake, right? And and everything I've heard internally says he acknowledges that. Like, he's like, I screwed up here. I'm not doing that again. I'm not wasting my time with kids that, I'm going to try and identify kids that won't leave the farm and won't leave. I'm going to try and identify and drop those kids much earlier, right? No matter how much I love their film, if they're not going to leave, 50 miles from home, I got to drop them earlier.
No, I got you. Now, look, I trust Bill. I trust Beaton Bow. I trust Beaton Bow wholeheartedly. But let's keep it moving. So obviously we focus a lot on the offensive line. Obviously, you know where I'm going to go because people are going to want to know about that defensive line. So I'm going to combine these two questions to kind of end this whole recruiting cycle. As far as this 25 class, we heard from BV on the Oklahoma breakdown that, he feels like this is not going to be a big class. So with you being a recruiting analyst, I guess the question is kind of two-part. One, how big will this class be? Like, what are the numbers what is your projection as far as the numbers that they take? And then two, what is the defensive? If we take a small class, does that impact the defensive line recruiting? Because I think people are going to want to know about that.
So the first problem is it's hard to know what OU's real numbers are, because you got players like Jake Roberts and Casey Thompson who were preferred walk-on deals. So you don't really know what the recruiting, what the graduated numbers will be, and maybe some of the seniors, like guys like Woody Washington and some of the other guys that have returned, they may be sort of, it's hard to know how they fit into this whole scholarship number that OU's working with. So most projections are around 23 or 24.
Okay.
I think OU will end up signing 26. I think when BV mentions that, because I heard the same interview, it was a great interview with Gabe and Teddy. I think he's talking about the combined newcomer pool, high school and portal. So it's not going to be as many portal guys as we think, and the high school class is going to be a couple less. But right now, OU's got 10 commits. They have 2 defensive linemen committed, Alex Shield Knight and Kamori Moore, one defensive end, one nose guard. If OU sticks in like the 22, 23 number, they're probably only adding one more interior defensive tackle. So I think the reason why this class goes from 22, 23 is because I think OU needs to add another interior defensive tackle. I think Zach Alley, you got to let Zach Alley sign at least 2 linebackers. They've already got Marcus James, and I think Zach Alley's out there recruiting, and I think you want to tell Zach, I think OU needs a Mike linebacker in this class. Yeah. Didn't get one last year. Nesta is probably a Will or a big Cheetah, depending upon what 3-3-5 stuff we see from OU this fall.
Yeah.
In my mind, I kind of see some big Cheetah stuff where Deshaun McCullough is really a Sam linebacker Cheetah, basically. And you have Dolby as like a small Cheetah nickelback. I think you'll see some stuff like that. But so I think you have to go up if you want another big defensive tackle, another linebacker. And Chris, I'm really confused right now about cornerback because right now Malik Hawkins, Michael's little brother and son of Sooner cornerback Michael Hawkins Sr., is about to commit in early April. OU leads for Tristan Haynes, the third piece of the Carl Albert the last piece of the Carl Albert guys, and he's a big-time cornerback who somehow I forgot when you asked me about the in-state guys. So it's 3 guys: Nate Roberts, C.J. Nixon, and Tristan Haynes. And they're also heavily involved with Kobe Sellers, Houston area cornerback who, top 100, top 150. So, and they're all big cornerbacks, bigger than the cornerbacks they got last year, like taller, bigger guys. So it's a nice mix. You add those guys in with Jeremiah Newcomb and Devon Jordan and Eli Bowen, all of a sudden you got a nice mix between the 2 classes. So if OU sticks to 22, 23, then they're not offering guys like they're going to stick with that, Chris. They just recently offered 3 big defensive tackles. The first one is Floyd Boucard from Miami. I just talked to him, and he's 6'4", 295 pounds. Told me he runs this is something, from my site, so I'm giving you a little insider information here. Tells me he runs a 4.75, and he's actually from Canada. So if you remember the last Canadian OU defensive tackle OU got, Neville Gallimore, Neville was a serious athlete, but this guy's bigger. He could be 6'4", 315, 320. They're also recruiting, trying to get an official visit with Josiah Sharma, who's from Sacramento. He's a former Washington commit. He's 6'5", 300 pounds. And if OU can get him on campus, OU will if he's available and they can get him as a defensive tackle from Opelika, Alabama, which is basically Auburn. And he's out on the market now, probably looking to he's committed to Auburn, but he's probably looking to make some other visits. And that name's Malik Autry. He just jumped up to number 34 on the 247 rankings. He's 6'5", 320. So OU's offered these guys in the last 2 weeks. That doesn't scream to me that they're only signing one more defensive tackle interior player.
No, that's not what the trend is looking like, at least. Yeah.
So I think OU finds a way to sign one legit 3 technique, whether that's Trent Wilson or Cole Brewer from Hun Academy. That's where Logan Howland is from. And where a bunch of players, I think back in the day, Myron Roll was from Hun Academy, if you remember that name.
Yeah.
So Hun Academy is a great school. So they got a player he's committed to visiting 621. And then they've got Landon Rink, who's the Texas legacy guy, top 150 player, 6'3", 280, another 3 techniques. They got a bunch of 3 techniques. They've got Kamori Moore, who's a kind of a, good player, but kind of an undersized nose guard. He's going to be 6 foot 300. That's probably, that's right where he's going to be. So I think OU wants a bigger DeJoun Terry type defensive tackle to finish the class.
Yeah.
A big guy, 6'3", 6'4", can carry 310, 315, 320, and anchor in the middle.
So speaking of DeJoun Terry, transfer portal. I think that's the perfect way to go ahead and put this baby to bed. Let's just go ahead and talk about that for a second. What is OU aggressive in the transfer portal this cycle, the second wave? I mean, and I'll be honest with you, a lot of people were kind of pissed off because everybody fell in love with the rumors about Hicks, about this kid, that kid, all the rest of this stuff, and you fell for the eye candy. And that's not to say that some of those faint rumors didn't have any behind them, but at the same time, it seems like a lot of fans, including myself at some points, kind of was wondering what the hell was going on with OU. Like, why weren't we more aggressive? Are we believers in not only DeJoun Terry, but obviously we lost Lacey, so I think you're going to be looking to replace that unless you would move Downs inside. Okay, I digress. But obviously you got Stoney. Obviously you got Jaden Jackson. You got Marcus Strong. You got Ashton Sanders. Can't forget about G-Baby, Grayson Halton. So you got guys on campus that you are familiar with and you feel really good about. I mean, we heard a lot about Ashton Sanders. And then obviously, I think Marcus Strong was just kind of like, no, it's cool. I get it, 6'5", all the rest of the stuff. But you heard really good things about him last year all the way through, just like you did with Ashton Sanders. So G-Baby, I think Grayson Hall, I think you just kind of waiting for him to really, really pan out. But I think this year he should be in the rotation. That 22 year, I had no problems with him on the field. Had no problems. He showed flashes. He showed really good things. No problems with him. But kind of going into this year, you kind of have to replace Lacey, right? So, obviously defensive line, but anywhere on the team, offensively, defensively, do you see the Sooners being aggressive in the portal or even willing to entertain a portal transfer?
Well, spring starts on Monday, right?
Yeah.
So I think the coaches, I think the defensive tackles they saw that they could get in December, the juice wasn't worth the squeeze, right? Like the guy was, whoever they wanted to get, they talked to, and then person was like, well, I want this much. And he's like, yeah, you're not worth that. That's not, it's not, let's not, we're not talking about that. And I don't think at the time they felt like they needed to do that. Lacey, and I think the blood clot stuff, obviously, something happened. We weren't talking about this in January. Yeah. Something happened in January with him health-wise. So, yes, I think if you don't, unless you're inviting me back on the show April 22nd, and you're asking for my spring game thoughts, and then my first thoughts are like, man, Marcus Strong, Ashton Sanders, Jaden Jackson, and David Stone, and G-Baby, as you like to call Grayson Halton. They all look phenomenal, man. D-line looks fantastic. Unless we're saying that, then yes, I think OU kicks the tires on a defensive tackle portal. Now they can't get anybody from the SEC. The story I've heard, my sources tell me that OU has agreed that they won't, even though they're not technically part of the SEC in April and May, that they won't take any SEC transfers. Both OU and Texas have apparently committed to not taking any SEC transfers. That's what they were asked to do, and that's what the agreement signed with. That's part of the agreement. It's part of the deal. Now, I'd be happy for somebody to refute that and tell me, get an official word to say that's wrong, but that's what my sources tell me.
I'm sure somebody's going to say you're full of what.
That's fine. That's fine. But that's what I hear right now, and I'm more than happy to change that opinion. If somebody gets me an official statement from somebody at OU saying something different, I'm more than happy to say, hey, guess I was wrong. But so that limits the pool of defensive players, because they obviously took Terry from Tennessee last year. So I think that's all dependent upon how the D-line looks. And OU starting, I mentioned the 3-3-5 to you before. OU starting to build some defensive end depth. And Brent Venables is talking about he wants to play PJ at 265. Well, Nigel Smith is going to be 270 before we know what happens.
Yeah.
Downs is 250, 255. Woolard's 250, 255, could be 260 easily. So there's a way I could see OU playing some more 3-3-5 looks out there, whereas now you're rotating Jack. You could play David Stone at defensive end. If you watched him in high school, he could play in a 3-4 look. He could play defensive end all day for you. And if you remember back in the day, Gerald would play a lot of defensive end when OU would move to a 3-man line to keep Gerald on the field. Yeah. So you'd have like Gerald, Adrian Taylor, and Jeremy Beal out there wrecking havoc. So I think it all depends on where you see the young guys developing and playing. Jaden Jackson, everyone's raving about him. He's up to 298. That's what he told people today at the press conferences he was at. So watching his film at IMG, he certainly looks like he could play nose guard, and you've got David Stone as his buddy. So I think I'm hedging here because I think it's all about how the young defensive line looks and how all the other defensive pieces look. I'm going to go out on a limb here and say, contrary to most other folks, I don't think OU picks up another offensive lineman post-spring. I think the guys they have, the newcomers, and players like Logan Howland, Heath Ozetta, and Josh Bates buttress the line. And the fact you got so many other offensive linemen in early, I mean, I think you'd have to have like an unbelievable tackle show up in the portal for them to be. And that guy those people just don't, those athletes and those players don't fall out of the sky like that. So I don't see it happening, but if it would be, there's a lot of thoughts. Maybe OU goes back to Landon Hatchett, Kieran Hatchett's brother, see if maybe he wants to transfer again. I don't know why you would pull in Chris. I don't know why you'd pull another interior player into this group.
Who the hell is playing center? That's the question.
Well, I think if Brooks or Heath Ozetta have a good spring, I think you could see Garen Hatchett playing center. He's played it before. He knows how to play it, and that would give you a junior. He's bigger than
Is he bigger than Everett?
Is bigger than Everett. He's 6'4", 310, 305. Everett's 6'2", 6'3", 285 range. So he's bigger than Everett, and Bates is probably not quite ready yet. Although Bates apparently was getting in a fight with all the defensive linemen last spring in August. Rain was talking up the fact he was getting into fights with everybody. So maybe Bates will take it over. But I think with all the guys you've got and all the competition you have, and the fact that Eugene Brooks or Eddie Pierre-Louis could legitimately take one of their interior spots across from Nuewu. Nuewu's starting at guard. Everyone's indicating that. Gabe was telling that. Well, every source I talk to says that Nuewu looks like a beast inside at guard. So I think the pieces are a little more identified than we think.
Yeah.
But I just don't see, unless it's a tackle who is a plug and play starter next to Sexton. I don't know why you go back to the portal.
Yeah. Skill position, I don't see us hitting the portal for anything out of that.
Running back, maybe, if you have to encounter some defections.
Yeah, I think that's the only way. I think wide receiver. Go ahead.
But did you see X-Rob's uniform photo?
Yeah.
I mean, Xavier Robinson looks in the best shape I think we've ever seen him in, and you got Taylor Tatum coming in, so nothing at running back. Deion Burks, everyone's raving about him at wide receiver, and the wide receiver room's already got.
If you can get Andrell Anthony back at least to 90%, I think BV said that him and Harrington should be ready to participate fully in the summer. But, man, if you can get him back to at least 90%, 80, 90%, it's going to be hell for people out there. Because
Brennan Thompson, right? I mean, Brennan Thompson enrolled after spring, was kind of banged up, barely played, and all he did every time he got on the field was catch a 60-yard pass or longer, right? I mean, it's like 5 catches for 300 yards. Like his average catch is like 55 or 60.
Yeah.
His average is stupid. So tight end, I'm a massive believer in Davin Mitchell. I
think Barrett Sharp, I think Roberts, and I think that Mitchell, you'll see him sprinkled in there, and then you'll see him kind of start taking over or whatnot. But man, I'm excited to see him. I'm excited to see if we're going. McIntyre was not bad as well. I like to see him out there. I'm ready for Caden Helms. I'm ready to see. When he first came in, I kept calling the kid. I said, to me, he's nobody but Grant Calcaterra, maybe a more athletic Grant Calcaterra. I said, he's just got to get on the field.
He's hurting. Apparently, he's going to be hurt first part of spring. So that kid cannot catch a break. So maybe it's part of his longer rehab. But if I was Caden Helms, I would not give Devon Mitchell any more reps out there to start learning college football. That kid, I just can't go back to the Under Armour practice highlights where he just ran over a Texas DB, and it didn't even look like he was even, he threw the horns down after he did it. He ran over Jason Rebel Johnson, and it was like he was just like, oh, did I run over somebody? I mean, the kid's an absolute monster. And to think that he's missing he reclassified and he's enrolled early is, I wasn't that dedicated as a high school junior or senior to make those things happen. So his commitment to making that happen, I think, speaks highly to I wouldn't underestimate what he can get accomplished this spring.
So I would say, I think there's three places that you could potentially see a portal guy come in. I would say they'd be a defensive line, most likely interior. And I would say possibly you could see OU do something at corner, maybe safety as well, just to kind of bolster those rooms. So I could see them doing something there.
The reports on Malone, our Dejan Malone are pretty high right now, and everyone's talking up Reggie Powers and Michael Bogo and the Boganowski. So and then you get, I think you'd have to have some injuries or just lack of confidence in some of the younger guys. I mean, Jacoby Johnson might be the name of this, might be one of those spring names where like, where did that guy come from? And everybody in recruiting will say, we told you he's 6'3", 190 pounds, and he runs a sub 4.4. I mean, and no one would throw his way. And I mean, it's his high school highlights are so funny because it's like they were like nothing. It's like, well, these are really boring. It's like nobody would throw at him. I mean, it's like his high school highlights were all at wide receiver because his D-back highlights were full of like no one ever throwing at him. It's like, what? it's like I have no DB highlights. Why? Because no one would ever pass in my direction. Guys never open and no one's ever challenging me. So, he's got the skills. So, they talk about playing Woody Washington at maybe nickel and a little safety to kind of flesh out his NFL, help with his NFL prospects, because obviously at cornerback he got an NFL grade, which obviously wasn't good enough for him to leave early or to just leave. So I think OU's going to try him at some other positions to give him some versatility in terms of his NFL ability. So that's another player that you add into the mix at safety, along with Bowen and Robert Spears, and 215 pounds of Robert Spears Jennings. And we just heard Justin Harrington's coming back.
Yep. Well, I guess we'll see. The portal season. So I would say everybody just kick back, relax, get ready.
Now,
go ahead.
Now, I am afraid that you might be saying, well, who are we losing?
Okay, that's a question in itself.
I mean,
you want to go there?
Well, the wide receiver room has a lot of alphas, and there's only so many balls, right? I mean, Kearney and Carrion are on campus already. Pettaway obviously is, we all think Pettaway will make a big jump this year. Brennan Thompson is poised to make a big jump if he can stay healthy. Linebackers kind of stacked. I don't want to jinx anything, but there's a lot of linebacker talent at OU now. The best I can, in like forever. I mean, if forever, I can't recall thinking that OU had four guys at linebacker that were all like legit dudes. And the two guys below them that might be dudes, just we haven't seen it yet. I mean, maybe Lewis Carter is the dude just by looking at him. I mean, the guy, he was killing people on special teams. So maybe a linebacker, maybe somebody in the DB group falls behind some of the younger kids. Would not shock me, Chris, if OU lost 4 or 5 guys on the opposite side of the portal coming out of spring.
I could see it. Just
a lot of talent in the last 2 classes, right? And you get surpassed, and you're a junior, and you're like.
I told my uncle one morning. I said, "Hey, man," I said, I'm kind of nervous because, man, these kids are going to transfer." And then I stopped myself and I said, "Wait a minute, we've been begging for OU to be like this for a while, to where you actually have that competitive depth, right?"
Yeah.
Everybody take a drink off of that, but you have that competitive depth. So it's been a while since you can remember having these type of kids on campus consistently. And I think what that just comes, and I'm not going to mention his name again on the pod, but we took really small classes. and we didn't take, huge classes where you had that depth and you were just so top heavy that you had to depend on those kids. And if those kids went out, a la a Hollywood Brown, then obviously I feel like CD can take over. I feel like Rambo was good in spurts, but it's just not the same. It's not the same attack. You see what I'm saying? You get what I'm trying to say? Yeah.
Yeah, you're not stacking. I mean, if you think about what Emmett Jones is doing recruiting wise,
yeah.
I mean, he brought in a great recruiting class with Kearney, Reagans, Carry On, and KJ Daniels, right? Good class. Then this class, I mean, some of the recruiting services dropped Elijah Thomas, the kid from Chakotah. I have no idea what they're thinking. The kid looks like a 5-star to me. He looks incredible. Jaden Dickens is just hooping it up, and somehow services dropped him because he wasn't going to any camps because he's scoring, he's again, like CJ Nixon, he's putting up 20 points and dunking the ball all over the place in basketball, so he's not attending any camps. And then Grayson Harris is just, again, 5'9", and he's been basically getting 100. He's had 1,000-yard season since his freshman year. Plays baseball, and he's just a slot weapon. So it's just, and then 26. You already got 26 guys from Emmett Jones. So you're just talking about that transition right there, right?
Yeah.
And then you talk about Chavis. It's R. Mason Thomas, it's PJ, it's Danny Okoye, and it could be CJ Nixon. Better defensive end recruits that OU has added in for forever, just stacking them year after year. We haven't seen that kind of stacking, especially on defense, and since I don't know when, maybe 02, 03, maybe.
Yeah. It's a process. It is definitely a process, but it looks like it's panning out. Man, I don't know about you, but all this talk right here has me excited. I'm so excited for the spring game, April 20th, 1 p.m. Be there. If you're there, hey, shoot me a DM, whatever. Say what's up. Come say what's up. I'll definitely be there checking out Team 130. Got to check them out. And I mean, if you don't have anything else to do, we'll definitely do this again. And just so y'all know, Chris won't be a stranger to the show. I definitely asked him, hey, come on the show anytime you got some good recruiting tidbits. We don't even have to go that long. Definitely want to venture out and get into this realm of these podcasts, I guess, is into this recruiting cycle. So hopefully you guys have enjoyed what you've heard tonight. We're gonna go ahead and wrap it up right there. But Chris, once again, for the people in the back, for the people in the front, for the people all around, go ahead and let them know exactly where they can find you and all your wonderful content.
You can find me and discuss recruiting with me anytime you want at Sooners360.com. You can be up to date on what's going on with recruiting by following me on Twitter at CM_Sooners360. And if you're starting to get addicted to recruiting and you want an hour of recruiting news and content every week, I do the Sooners 360 recruiting podcast is recorded every week, and we talk nothing but OU football recruiting, not 30 minutes of chit chat about this or that or some other topic you don't want to talk about. It's OU football recruiting, and somehow we're on episode 71. We'll be recording probably tomorrow, and we have talked Sooner recruiting for a full year. It is a year-long endeavor. So you wouldn't think we could talk about it every week. Somehow we find enough content to give you guys recruiting news pretty much year-round.
So, guys, and I'm going to double back on that and just say, look, if I'm not listening to Ikert and Lehman on Oklahoma Breakdown, if I'm not listening to Jay, not listening to Ty, even PG, or any of my guys that I do pods with or whatever, I'm definitely listening to Sooners 360. A lot of great stuff from the times that you were doing it with Barry and all of them. Definitely enjoyed the content, and it's just been great to listen to you tonight. Definitely insightful. Got some homework that I need to do to get ready for not only this weekend, but just kind of going forward with this recruiting class and forward to the 26 and even the 27 class. But with that being said, it's been another episode of the Horns Down podcast. Guys, I made it. I did it. I didn't say anything crazy about Texas. I'm sure they're going to be in the comments like they were on the last video. If you haven't checked that out, go check that out. It was our video about why Jackson Arnold will be successful in 2024. 5 reasons. We gave you 5 reasons. I did that video with Barry from the Barry and Mac podcast. So with that being said, we're going to go ahead and end this episode, and we out.
You know, there's a lot of great OU podcasts, but there's only one